and welcome back to the MMcast Masters of Modern podcast. I am your host, Alex Kess, here with my co-host, Carson Masse. Welcome to, I think your third guest appearance, maybe fourth. So. I think it's fourth because I think you were on the Academy Awards episode, right?
Yes, I was.
And then you were on the Whitney episode. I think you've been on this episode as just yourself before,
as just me, yes.
Not in like large groups doing event content. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's my Friday. It is not legally Friday, but it is my Friday.
Is it not legally? It's legally Friday in some places.
In some places, but
it's 9:44 p.m. on a Thursday. That's
on the west coast of the United States. It is legally Thursday.
That's fair. Time zones are overrated, as the United States Senate is deciding. Or I guess they're deciding daylight savings time is overrated,
which
but
is
that's like
even stupider than time zones.
Time zones make sense. I understand why time zones exist. They could not exist. They don't need to. We don't have to get into this. We're talking about Magic the Gathering on this podcast. And very briefly, I do want to thank all of our sponsors, specifically Ultra Pro, who makes some of the best Magic product you can buy for your day-to-day purchases, as well as Alter Sleeves that if you use our code the MMcast on altersleeves.com, you can get really cool custom sleeves. We are working on a very special Alter sleeve that you can get on our Patreon, but we can't talk about that yet. But if you are on our Patreon, that is also a big help. You get early access to these episodes, 10 minutes early of content, all for you. And then we got another one, but I'm going to shout out the last big sponsor and big news later in this episode. But we are talking today. So the internet discourse exists and it continues to roll forward. I had a good TikTok today where I talked about how the discourse on TikTok is following Twitter, where there's now discourse about the discourse. And by making that tweet TikTok, I made discourse about the discourse about the discourse. But there is a conversation going on right now kind of about the state of Magic, and specifically how I'm going to make a statement, and Carson may disagree. Over the last X amount of years, Commander has become a larger focus of Magic, to the extent that I would argue that it is the most forward-facing, and it is Magic. If you are to tell someone, hey, I played a game of Magic, the assumption could be, or is now, especially to newer players, that you played Commander over other formats of Magic, and that it has now become the main version of Magic, and all other formats, though important, are the next step below, where at one point that was standard, at other points it was limited. It has sadly never been modern. One day we'll overtake all these
I believe in you
formats. And people disagree if that's a good or a bad thing. You know, and specifically the rules committee, the people behind Commander, don't think that's a good thing. and maybe have argued that they don't necessarily think that's true. And so that's a little bit we're going to talk about, is is it beneficial? Wizards is definitely making product in a way that's happening. There was a big announcement about Command Fest that we're going to be talking about. That might actually be the first thing we're talking about. What that means for paper Magic. This kind of rides off of the back of last week's episode, where we had the Torben, one of the not one of the main community manager and one of the main people behind the DreamHack Magic events, to talk about what the Pro Tour circuit's going to look like. And kind of since then, there's been a big announcement in regards to Command Fest coming back, and it all kind of builds this story. Is Commander the face of Magic? Is that good for Magic? And is Magic in a good place?
Was that a thesis statement, or do you want me to answer that?
You can respond.
Okay. I agree with Commander being the face format of Magic right now. I'm not going to try to put a number on it, but I do think that Commander makes up a larger portion of constructed formats than any other format. And I don't believe it's particularly close at this point. I think Commander is consistently growing at a greater pace than any format has before it. Maybe that might be a reach.
I think there's a chance other formats have grown faster, but more from a I think Limited grew faster than Commander is growing now, just because it went from not existing to existing. And
the biggest thing that I'm thinking of is when Arena started.
Sure.
That made Standard and Limited way more accessible than they were before that.
That's fair.
But yeah, I think Commander is the default way to play Magic at this point.
Well, I think one of the challenges that comes from that is, and this is, I think, a little bit of where the Commander RC and the Commander Advisory Group come from on this issue, is that from their perspective, and we talked a lot about this when Jim from the Spike Feeders and On the CAG was on a few months ago, how there's a viewpoint, and I'm saying other people's viewpoints because I do pretty much thoroughly disagree with it, but that because the other formats like Modern, Pioneer, Standard, Draft, whatever, and Pro Play was not being supported, that is the main driving force behind Commander becoming more competitive. I don't believe that's true. I think some people think that and some people don't think that, or maybe is. Yeah,
I think it's a contributing factor, but I don't, by any stretch of the imagination, I don't think it's the sole source of the power creep of intent within Commander, if that makes sense.
I think from my perspective, to the first statement you made, right? And I kind of made it, then you corroborated. Commander is growing faster than ever before. Is the largest growing format. I think Commander is so much bigger than what pro players ever have been, even as a percentage of people that played competitive Magic. That even if every single pro player became, and like to add layers, I think like less than 1% of Commander players are CDH players, and I think that the percentage of all pro players that exist are like less than 1% of CDH players.
I agree with that.
Which is like a very small number.
It's a tiny number. It's almost small enough to like actually put a number to it, compared to like the amount of Commander players there are, which is a lot of Magic players. But yeah, it's like I haven't seen, like Reed Duke isn't playing CDH. I don't know how much Commander he plays, but I haven't heard that a lot of the pro players are going straight for CDH, which if you don't know, like if you're not watching that thread, then it's an easy assumption to make. But I do think it's false, because I don't think that's the only thing that's pushing pro players into Commander.
Yeah, well, I think in fact, I would say the pro players that I've seen and played with have leaned more towards the Olivia Shivam side of like wanting Commander to be more casual, where they're like, oh yeah, combos aren't fun, I'm not going to play with them, and counter spells are, like they're like, I want to just have like.
And Brian Kibler's a great example of this. He's world champion. He's in the Hall of Fame, and his favorite deck is dragons. He loves dragons.
I mean, that was true when he played competitive Magic, but
well, yeah, but like that's kind of it. Like he loves a part of Magic, and he's not compromising that. He's not compromising playing the stuff that he likes to win more games.
Yeah, I think the like it's I think there are two conflicts within the Commander community, and I do want to get to like how this is relevant to Modern to some extent, but I think there's two kind of conflicts within competitive play. Right, there's the first one, which is ostensible disagreement on, is competitive Magic good for a Commander? And we've had an entire podcast episode where I believe it is. I think like what CDH has done is actually been one of the more beneficial things to Commander over the last 2 years. The fact that there is now a conversation to be had around what power level you want to play with, and a place to find a home for that level of play, right? Previously, it was just like, oh, those two guys who you all thought were assholes because they would pub stomp tables because they were playing like Reddited net deck Commander decks, and they're like, well, I want to play the best Commander deck I can play, and I want to play against other people. Like when you talk to them, be like, oh yeah, I have this. They talk like CDH players, but like there wasn't language for that back then. Yeah, the store and the community didn't know how to be like, oh, that's cool, here's a table for you. It was like, I will just randomly put you with the guy who has a precon. And the fact that the CDH community has specifically built a language around it, I think has been so amazing that I think every other version of Commander needs like that language around it. I think one of the reasons I was so motivated to create Artisan and or work with the community to create that format is to come up with like, oh, here, I can come up with a format where everyone is limited by restrictions that creates that old school feeling of Magic. And I think that's my thought on that. But I think that like that belief is not common amongst everyone. And there is a little bit of that old school people that tried playing the best possible Commander deck are pub stompers who don't understand that Commander is about having their definition of fun.
Yes. Commander is the base idea is to reward not just winning compared to traditional competitive formats where you are rewarded for winning the most games. Commander is supposed to have a more diverse reward system, for lack of a better word. You're supposed to do what you enjoy, what your group enjoys, and just like hang out with people for a while around a game of Magic. Was the intent behind the format. Obviously, there's a whole lot of like make of it what you want, and a lot of people have gravitated towards CDH, which is great. And I definitely agree that the more kinds of Magic that are available, including both the full power spectrum of Commander and also all the other established tournament formats, the more of that is available, the healthier any one of them, especially Commander, is going to be.
The language about like how you want to play, it's the whole, I mean, not to bring other internet discourse into this podcast, proxies are fun. But it's kind of the whole proxy argument, right? Because for a long time, proxies were used as a power level complaint, right? Is like, oh, that guy's proxied his deck, which means that he has Gaia's Cradle and he has, every
all
deck
the
that
fast mana
they own has the fast
tutors.
mana. They're, she's playing with a Mox Diamond, whatever. It like all these cards that I couldn't afford, and they like, why do they get to play with them just because they have a printer? And then you get into the whole conversation about the card economy, but and what's best
Capitalism.
for the LPS. But yeah, proxies are fun. But because of the whole kind of the change on what Rule Zero conversations are, it's much more about the person who comes to your table with a Gaia's Cradle deck who's going infinite and printed that deck out is not an asshole for proxying their deck. They're an asshole for mispower leveling their deck in the pod that they're playing with.
Yeah.
Right? It's like if the person had Gaia's Cradle or didn't have Gaia's Cradle, the fact that they're playing at a power level above what you're expecting is the issue, not
and the way that they the way that they got that Gaia's Cradle is completely irrelevant to the gameplay that's going on.
Correct. Like how it's just at this point, it's either how wealthy they are or how old they are, and neither of them should be why they get to play with a card that you don't, if that's your concern.
And to be clear, proxy legality from a formal format perspective is not going to change for all the viewers out there. Don't go into the comments. Don't start fights. It's not going to change.
Do whatever you want. Whoa, Carson. The algorithm
start fights with Kessler.
beget that you fight in the comments. just want YouTube to like us. But
that's my mistake. I'm not a YouTube native. Start fights in the
comments. Just don't be mean to me or each other. Or especially Carson.
Anyway,
the more and I'm a big proponent of supporting your store. I'm a big proponent of owning cards. Like I love the cards I own. I think, as we will eventually shout out one of our last sponsors in a second, one of the things you can do is go buy cards from them using codes like the MMcast to get us a 5% reward on channelfireball.com. I think that especially for tournament play, it's really important. And then for Commander, even like owning your own deck that's real feels great and
feels good. I agree.
And the conversation point is more like power level conversations than not. And then, but okay, so that's the power level conversation that is like this big contentious issue. And then it doesn't help that like the CDH community is at fault in its own way. And a lot of times they like feel like they're like a second class citizen, which has its own language ramifications. It's a lot of problems. We don't have to get into that, but
isn't that part of the topic at hand, Kess?
Maybe. But let's get to the other half, which is pro players are now playing Commander, and they are, and this podcast definitely understands that. We've had Andrew Brown on a bunch of times. The Magic Pro players are one of the most well heralded game design resources in the world. Like, and I'm not like saying that to blow the horn of pro players. Like most gaming companies, especially tabletop ones, look at Magic Pro players as a great source of game design because these are people who have made careers out of learning how to exploit and break game systems and to find solutions to prevent those game breaking exploits from winning, right? Like you're either...
For those of you who don't know, a lot of people on the Wizards of the Coast play design teams have come straight out of Pro Tours.
Correct.
Melissa DeTora is the leader of the casual play design team. She won a bunch of Pro Tours. She did really well in professional Magic until she was hired by Wizards.
Andrew Brown runs regular play design. He had one of the quickest multiple top 8 Pro Tour experiences of all time. You have, it's a very long list. So now this group of people who are now paying attention to Commander, be it through Olivia dating Brian Kibler and then Brian Kibler loving Commander and convincing every one of his friends who are all pro players to start playing Commander, who then convinced all of their friends, be it through the fact that pro Magic has fallen by the wayside during the pandemic, and the main way you now interact with Magic, if you love Magic, that the studio making the game is pushing is through Commander, be it through just they started playing Commander because it's fun and they like Magic. And the thing that Magic pro players are not always good at is expressing opinions on the internet.
Kess, no.
This is the Discord podcast, Carson. I opened it up with Twitter discourse coming here. We won't talk about specific B followed by S Twitter users, but we will talk about they're like, I think this was like a few weeks ago where Sam Black, who is great and one of the best Magic players of all time and a great writer in making Magic content, was like, why is stasis or stasis-like cards, I think, what was it?
Winter Orb, maybe?
Winter, yeah. Why is Winter Orb not banned in Commander was basically his point, which is like, this is, if the point of the ban list to say these cards suck,
why does this card that ostensibly sucks
is the best example of what sucks? Why is that the one that's legal versus like other examples which like are definitely and there is a whole argument that I don't want to have on this podcast about Commander ban list philosophy, but that's kind of the points they were making, right? Is like, oh, if I was redesigning the ban list from the ground up or redesigning the idea from Commander with the viewpoint of I want the Commander ban list to not be here's a list of cards that we don't think you should be playing with. It's here's a list of cards that we think represent a good list of cards and they're like that you should avoid playing to create the best experience, which is what its current intended goal is.
Yeah, there is an intent of like keeping it small, keeping it compact, and importantly, restricting it to cards that people play so that each ban has an impact.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, people know not to play Armageddon most of the time.
I actually think that we're hot taking. I think Armageddon is a bad card. And when I say that, I mean, I don't think it's unfun. I think it is a bad card strategically in Commander.
It is not a powerful Magic card.
Yeah. Like I think in 1v1, it's good because you're able to create a guaranteed parity between you and one player, or at least you are able to likely win off of you mitigating that problem. But doing that to 3 players separately while taking advantage of it is hard when you're playing a singleton deck. So unless your deck is designated to that strategy, which then falls into the unfun problem where people just won't want to play with you after the first time, then your deck can't take advantage of it or won't be very good at taking advantage of it. Your opponents will have way more time to bounce back from having it happen to them.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just bad in the format. I think it's just not a good, like it is a losing strategy.
Yeah. And there are decks that take advantage of it, but in general, I more meant like land destruction or hate is generally disliked. But Armageddon is not played all across the format. People aren't slotting Armageddon into like precons and crap. Which is why
I think another good example is, I think it's Sadistic Hypnotist. What's the sacrifice a creature to make a player discard 2 cards?
I think it's Sadistic Hypnotist. I know what you're talking about.
Sadistic Hypnotist combo has like fallen really by the wayside. That card is still good, right? Like making all of your opponents discard their hands is as powerful as it's always been, but it's miserable. And
it is an effective way to win a game that will lose friends and alienate people.
Right. And the one thing I will say in that world, and that's like, I think a lot of the problems, like this is the issue Ben had a problem with entering into Commander, right? Like this is why CDH was the best tool given to me to get Magic modern players or competitive players into Commander, which is a different conversation than them making it more competitive. It is a tool to get them into it, because now Ben doesn't like CDH, right? He's like hardcore 7 all the way, wants to come up with dumb. It's kind of in the same Brian Kibler sense, where he's like, I want to come up with dumb things where I'm playing aggressive 2-drop red and white creatures. How do I make that work in Commander? That's not CDH. That's at best a 7.
Yeah. How do I take this good draft deck and port it into Commander? Well,
yeah,
you're going to lose a lot of games, Ben.
And so, not according to Sydney, but who made uncommon walls work. But
yeah, there's a different philosophy between ban lists curated for tournament formats and the ban list that is curated for Commander.
Right. And that was like
designed differently.
And I think it started with like Tom Martell being like, why is Primeval Titan banned? And that was one that was like grown. You weren't playing when that card was legal. It's in this format.
Like
that card is
someone's gonna have to teach you that card is an actual problem.
Yes. Like honestly, I think Primeval Titan is arguably, it's not a problem in Modern, but it is on the border. Sure. There are a lot of cards on the ban list, or cards that could be put on the ban list, that are on there because Primeval Titan exists. And so like, I think that card should have been 1 land per thing in the first place when it was first printed, but here we are.
There's a lot of ways to make Primeval Titan a more fair Magic card.
But the point being, like, they were looking at it like, because there are problems, right? Like that's like the thesis of this entire episode, is that there are not problems. But
are we getting into the ban list discussion now?
No. We're getting into. I'm going back to like pro modern Magic players, looking at Commander and how they would change it. I think that is a resource worth listening to versus a resource worth ignoring. And I think that there is a level of, oh, you didn't let me on your table back in the day, why should I allow you onto my table now that I'm on top? Vibes.
So
it does segue to the next thing I want to talk about. Yep.
Hey, we did it. Perfect segue.
Dab. Before we do that, speaking of Command Fest, Channel Fireball, our new home, we now live there, is hosting Command Fest Las Vegas this summer. And also, if you want to buy any Magic cards for Commander decks or Modern decks or Pioneer decks or any format that you're playing, and you want to buy them on channelfireball.com, if you use the code TheMMcast at checkout, we get benefited from it. They like us more, and make sure this podcast keeps happening. And then also, there's a link below. You can click that. All right, so just brief change the subject. We're gonna be doing trivia, and I have a cool thing that I got to open, which is really fun. And for those who are just joining, the way this works is I'm gonna ask Carson a trivia question. This is and you get to answer it as well. He's going to him and haw for a second trying to remember the answer, and everyone please comment it below. And then if you get it right, you have to hit that like, subscribe button. This is really just me trying to get you to hit that like and subscribe button. It would be really cool if you just did that anyways. But if you get the trivia question wrong, you are required to hit the like and subscribe button. If you get it right,
does something else happen if they get it right?
We like their. Well, I will like personally, and the MMcast will also like it if they get it right. So you get some likes. Okay. You get likes. We get likes. We're all liked together.
Don't you want to be liked?
Yeah, I do.
Comment down below.
Carson,
Alex,
there was a instant and sorcery that was officially colorless. An instant or sorcery that was officially colorless.
I was going to say, is it both? Because that's even crazier.
No, it's one or the other. Printed before Zendikar block. What card was that?
Before OG Zendikar?
It was before OG Zendikar. So not like there's like the Eldrazi counterspell or there was a.
That's a good question.
I can give you a hint. This is officially a colorless card that was printed before Zendikar, and it is a instant or sorcery. What is the name of that card? I can give you a hint. I can give you multiple hints. You can ask for hints.
I have an idea, so I think I'm just going to guess.
Okay.
Is it Ghostfire?
It is Ghostfire. All right. So my hints was that it is also the first reference to Ugin in Magic. And Ghostfire is 2 red instant. Ghostfire is colorless. It was the first colorless instant, and it was also the first reference of Ugin, and it is eventually what opened up the Eye of Ugin to allow the Eldrazi to be released later on. It's the spell that Chandra needs to learn off of the Dragon Scroll. It's a whole thing. All right, and that brings us to one other really cool thing that happened. We got a sweet box from Beetle and Bard. It's their like Kamigawa themed
did I get
backpack.
one too?
Yeah,
Crap, I
no,
should look
well, the royal we. And so there's stuff like this life counter that looks like the it's a samurai crab, which there's a card name for it.
Rad.
Someone got mad at me that I didn't know the name of that card, but it's really awesome. It comes with this backpack that is like has a bunch of dividers in it for magic cards. It's bright colors. It came with like all of these different certificates and posters and artwork. I actually got the certificate of authenticity, and I am lucky number 1,420, which means that I've won this lottery. There's one backpack that's better, which is just straight 420, and I'm excited to find out who got that. But there's even stuff like this playmat. This playmat itself is gorgeous, but
Ogre Head Helm is the card.
Yeah, Ogre Helm is the card, but there's an extra cool bit, and that is that it actually has a neon glow edge that you can change the color of.
That's trippy.
Really dope. It's actually for sale for Peter right now. So if you go to Beetle Bard website, they have it under their Magic store. There's two versions. There's like a $500 version that comes with the backpack and the mat and everything, and then there's like a $200 version that you can get your little samurai crab. Amongst other things, there's like a Tanuki plush. There's really cool token counters that like look like ancient coins for +1 or +1/+1 counters, and then also there's what's the counter like Death Touch and Intimidate, all of the different ability counters they now do. Just recommend checking it out. It's gorgeous. I did a whole opening on TikTok you can watch as well. Look at this little crab man. Get him. Gonna crab around, but threw that sponsorship shout out, and now we're on Command Fest. So last week Wizards of the Coast out of nowhere announced 15, I believe, Command Fests around the world and country. I think it's 10 in the US, 9 in the US, and 6
most of them are in the US
world. Yeah,
there's a few others
in the Americas for sure.
South America, Europe, APAC region, all getting Command Fests.
Yeah. And these are being thrown by a bunch of different TOs. So this is back to the old Grand Prix system in some ways, where like Channel Fireball, Star City Games is doing one in Richmond, where a lot of our friends are going. There's Cascade Games is doing one. Like all the different big TOs that used to do Grand Prix before Channel Fireball took over all of them are now doing them across the country.
So funny that they're doing one in Bellevue and not Seattle.
Oh, well, there's not one in LA.
I mean, anyway. There's 15 around the world. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in North America. So
about half. So big announcement. It's just from June through August, I believe. So it's only that quarter. So it's only a quarterly announcement. There's not announcements for what's happening for fall or
June and July.
That. June and July. It's not even August. I thought there was a Brazil. There's like one of them was in August.
Nope.
Cool. Carson's got the list up.
I have the list up.
And these were based off of the Command Fest that were happening before the pandemic. So there were 3 then. There was one in Chicago, one in Seattle, and then one in Washington, D.C. I was able to go to the Washington, D.C. one that was by Star City Games. And they are commander-focused events. They're not like a Grand Prix where you have a big opening tournament and then a bunch of side events and there's a command zone. It's literally just almost the command zone with artists, creators, and retailers being there as well. And it's really exciting. That along with the DreamHack events we talked last week means that like in-person large events are happening again, which is really cool. And there's going to be ones every weekend, kind of back to that old style. I do have like some complaints about the system and how they're being rolled out. One of them that's really weird and just feels like is that Richmond and the DreamHack event are the same weekend.
Also, Orlando and Bellevue are the same weekend.
That one's less like Command Fest happening the same weekend is less surprise. Well, I guess it all happening the same weekend makes sense. It's just like a little weird to me that you would like be.
I think it's a symptom of them just trying to do a lot very quickly. Yeah, like they could have easily spread this out into August and not had overlapping events.
Which to me also means that they're planning on more right? Like their plan is to go back to the 2 GPs or every other. A lot of weekends will have 2 GPs a weekend, and they'll now have 2 Command Fests a weekend around the world. I do think that they also wanted to give like as many of the different TOs a chance to do a Command Fest in this first run, and they wanted it to happen within those 2 months because they wanted to start there. And by doing that, you are going to have overlaps, including with the DreamHack event. The other thing is that, and this was my complaint with Command Fest. Like I was able to go. Some of it was amazing. Doing like a guaranteed space for Commander is really cool. It was only Commander, and I know it's called a Command Fest, but I believe that any type of these large events should have space for all people that want to go play Magic there. And this is where I do agree with the RC on this issue, right? Is that Wizards is in some ways letting these other formats not get focused on in a way that's putting the onus of all of Magic onto Commander. And I think that's a mistake.
Deeply unhealthy.
And the Command Fest is the thing that is a good example where that's a problem, right? Like you couldn't draft at Command Fest DC. That was not an available option.
I went to Command Fest Seattle, and there were drafts firing all weekend. Battle Bond and maybe some Conspiracy.
So that was what, like, I posted this, and then I got, so they're all run by different TOs, right? So different TOs did stuff differently. The SEG one, which was the one in DC, had no limited formats available. There was Commander. You could buy from some of the retailers sealed product and try and put together your own draft, right? You could pick a table, but even then it was weird because the tables weren't really designated for that. It was kind of the like, and so the story of how the Command Zone was invented. So not the Command Zone, the people, Command Zone, the area in a Commander in a Grand Prix or a Magic Fest was in Magic Fest Los Angeles 2018. They just so happened to have, I'm going to say 50% of the largest content creators in the space in LA all at the same time. You had like the Professor, Jimmy and Josh, Shivam, the Commander-in guy. Well, at that point, Shivam was the Commander-in group. You had, like a bunch of these different Commander groups all there all at the same time. And they all got kicked out of the event because they couldn't pick a table for more than 5 minutes before getting kicked off, and we're all forced into a food court. Like Wizards, like Jules Robbins was there, like designers of the game were all like put into the food court where there was like 4 tables
because they wanted to play Commander.
Because they were trying to play Commander at this Magic event, and there was no space designated for them. By Seattle, Command Zones existed, and that was in March. Seattle was in June. And they've invented the idea of a Command Zone, which was this designated area that you had to pay money to be a part of because you needed to be able to afford the space and the real estate that you're taking up.
And they needed to have a way to measure it in addition to like paying for the space.
Right. And that that has its own issues, which we talked a lot about last week, but it created a place and a home for Commander at these events. Now they're doing the opposite. And I do have from tournament organizers, I can't say who they were, that they are not allowed to run larger than 8 pod tournaments at these events. Like you are not allowed to do a 10K or an open event or anything larger than maybe specific drafts or 8 pods. And so one of the reasons they're not even focusing on having those events is they have been explicitly told you cannot run tournament Magic in any real way at these events.
This is a Commander event. Nothing can distract from the focus of Commander.
Yeah. Now we do know, and I think one of the reasons this event was created the way it was created is that it coincides with the Baldur's Gate release.
I think Richmond does.
Well, I think, but the Richmond's at the beginning. So all 8 of them are within the draft window of Richmond of Baldur's Gate, right? So
they want to allow you to draft the new Commander set.
Correct. So there's going to be a lot of emphasis on that being the main draft format of these events, and they will all be holding Baldur's Gate draft formats. It's literally DreamHack and Richmond will both be the launches of Baldur's Gate that weekend, which is the 2 competing events, will be the launch of that format. And so I also think that's the other kind of idea behind these all happening right then, all at the same time, is that Magic is doing their big next Commander product release. They wanted to bring it along with Command Fests, and that was their idea. So like it sucks to me that they're not allowing these just to be Magic Fests without the Grand Prix. That's, I guess, kind of where my like final thought on it was. Like DreamHack's really cool. And that is a foothold to competitive Magic players, but I think that if you're going to be making these conventions The fact that like if I have a friend like Ben used to be who doesn't want to play Commander, they're just not going to want to go to this when you could have easily created just like have mystery boosters on tap for draft or have whatever, like have allow 8-pod modern events to fire. And I wish there was a middle ground.
Yeah. It is very weird that, as you said, we have gone full reverse from where Magic Fest used to be, where people used to get kicked out because there wasn't space for Commander. And it seems like most of the Magic luminaries agree with that statement, but there are a lot of people who make up the larger community who think the opposite, where they're like, well, Commander players had to deal with this. Why shouldn't competitive players have to deal with this? Because it sucks. Because it's dumb and stupid.
It was a mistake then.
in this the year of our Lord 2022, we shouldn't have to deal with that kind of crap. So like, yeah.
It's
there is enough space, literally and figuratively, for every kind of Magic, and they should all be supported.
It would not be hard to support both.
There was so much extra space at Command Fest Seattle in 2019. You could have easily had, not at the scale of like whatever the biggest Grand Prix used to be that featured modern or standard tournaments, but they don't need to be.
I've been to Grand Prix that were like middle August, right before rotation, maximum the tournament maybe hit 650 people. Like it was a better EV to play in the Grand Prix than to play in the PTQ at the same event because there were just more spots per person in the Grand Prix over 2 days than there were for the 1-day PTQ to get into the Pro Tour, etc. Just because it was a lame duck format, right? And
so like the biggest thing, unless they're holding on to other event announcements for some reason, there's just like not a good reason to exclude all the other formats from these events like this.
Right. There's the DreamHack events. And one thing I thought was like maybe there's an exclusivity deal with DreamHack, but that's not necessarily true either because you don't have to have this be attached to Pro Play. Like because SCG would do this, right? Like Star City Games would run a Star City Games Open at Command Fest Richmond if they were allowed
Fireball
to.
would do it in a heartbeat.
Right. They both have tournament series. They both have the ability to run big events. That's what Channel Fireball did at the Magic the Gathering Las Vegas that happened last year. They just ran a big tournament and they ran a big command zone and they were able to do a really great event. That was amazing. But because there's a top-down pressure from someone saying, no, you are not allowed to do that, you're now creating this weird stratified experience. And then the fact that Magic Fests haven't been announced and there has been official announcement saying at the moment there is no plans on really doing anything like a Magic Fest again, that's like, oh, you are ignoring modern. You are ignoring, like you're only doing it through your Pro Play series that you're trying to create through the DreamHack system. Why are these not being supported at these massive events when that is a big it's not the massive one, it's not the major one, but it's a big portion of your audience.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us to the last part of the conversation I wanted to have, which is, and it won't be the last because we have time, but the kind of the conversation on like, is Commander being the main version of Magic good for Magic? Like it had, I think like from the CAG, from members of the organization body of Commander, they don't think it is, right? To an extent, or they've expressed that where it's like, it's great that it's the most popular, but it shouldn't be the main way people play Magic. There should be other ways for people to play Magic.
Yeah, I think the short version, I'm not going to say the short version. It's fine that Commander is the main way to play Magic, but it definitely should not be the only way. Commander actively suffers when other formats aren't healthy.
I agree with that, right? I think that
it's also hard to say with a straight face that like Commander should be the only way to play Magic. There's not really a way to justify that statement.
Sure, absolutely. I think it's more, is what's going on with Commander the worst version of Magic? And that's the thing I kind of don't agree with. Like, I don't think Commander's in a bad spot. I think Commander's actually in a great spot.
Yeah. I think the biggest threat to Commander is the looming threat to other formats.
Sure.
I think that's the only thing that really puts Commander in jeopardy in any meaningful way right now.
And I don't even think that like
people are still going to play Commander. Nobody's going to quit Commander if modern events stop happening at a large scale.
Sure.
But I do think that will. I don't have the vocabulary to articulate this effectively, but I think when those formats go away, Commander just becomes worse because all of the things that people want out of those formats, they now are only able to get out of Commander.
I guess that's what I disagree with. I think they are getting that out of Commander regardless. Like, I don't think the wants out of what players are getting from a modern tournament, like other than outside of the gravy train version, right? Like, yes, the grinder part of the Magic event goes away, but I think that doesn't go to Commander. I think that just goes to other games, right? You become a Flesh and Blood 100%. Player or a League of Legends player or a Hearthstone.
Flesh and Blood, League of Legends, Hearthstone.
There were a ton of competitive esport like games that you can change that mentality to.
That's
if
been
Magic
happening.
Doesn't offer it. Right. Like, there's a reason Legends of Runeterra is doing well.
Yeah. Professional Magic is like kind of stagnating, and it has been for a number of years, and a lot of pro players have left for other games that just pay better.
Yeah, and I also disagree not with you, with the world, I guess, why like that happened because of the pandemic. Sorry, everyone. Like, every time the argument comes up, I'm like, Wizards didn't kill pro play because they didn't like it. They killed pro play because the pandemic killed it, and then they did well.
Oh, the biggest damage to pro play was because of the pandemic, but the exodus of pro players into other games was happening way before the pandemic started.
No, I disagree. There was a moment before the pandemic happened where pro players pushed for a format that was more based on being able to make a living being a pro player. And that is what created the MPL system, which started like 6 months before that. Like, that was not a long lasting program, at most a year before the pandemic. And really, because of the way that system was created, it needed like 3 years to be actually existing, right? Because like the starting one was X people, and then you had to like go through a year of people earning and out earning to figure out what those kinks were.
For the MPL to be successful, you needed to be able to see how it worked, and it never had a chance to work before the pandemic happened.
And like, there's quickly like obvious mistakes on how that was structured and built. That then the pandemic happened, they're like, it's a lot, we're not going to fix this, so we're just going to stop because we have to stop pro play anyway anymore,
and we don't have the resources to figure it out, so good luck.
Yeah, it was not like it's not, we don't have the resources to have a structure. We're not allowed to have the resource. We could give you all the money. It's not like they didn't have the money to do it. It's just, legally, they could not run a tournament series nor have the liability of doing so for 2 years. So like the pro play exodus didn't really start until after that, right? Like the SCG held on to their pro players until maybe earlier this year. And I do think their big layoff that they did, where they laid off as many writers, was partially because there was no pro circuit in sight. And the announcement that happened 5 weeks ago when this podcast gets released, was an amazing one for that. And like, once that circuit starts happening, once the RPTQ, PTQ, World Championship, DreamHack event, tournament series starts again, like, these will start being built. The difference is the face of Magic celebrity has changed.
Yes.
And that's going to be an interesting change, because the big secret was always, oh no, being a pro Magic player was being a person who built enough of a record that they can then convince an SCG, Star City Games, Channel Fireball.
You could leverage how good you are at Magic into people giving you money to write about.
Correct.
Whatever.
You became a content creator. Like, that was being a pro Magic player. Was you did casting, you did streaming, you had written articles, you got a job at Wizards, right? You got a job at other game design companies. Like, the actual pro Magic player experience was using that as a resume builder to capitalize on.
Yeah, being measurably factually good at Magic was a pathway to some other avenue that paid the bills.
Right. And some of that, I don't know if that exists still, but I can't imagine that if an Andrew Brown like person showed up again, where like they just like won 2 pro tours in a row, doesn't get a deal with Channel Fireball or Star City Games to write articles on a weekly basis.
Right.
If they're a good writer, right? Or they just are able to like, hey, my name's on the front page of Wizards. Everyone knows who I am now because I'm the double Pro Tour winner, and the clout that comes with that happens. I'm streaming every week about which decks I'm working on for the next one. That person will find success. Unless they're like a terrible person. And even then, regrettably...
Or if they're somehow not good at anything except Magic.
But then like there's even the Wizards of the Coast like that.
Right.
Like there are WotC employees that are not good at talking or writing about Magic, but are great at Magic, and they have been able to capitalize. And there's like going to be a few people that can't do it, right? Like, but that's true of every job.
Right.
Like, I can't...
There's... by nature of the world, there won't be 100% correlation between good at Magic, even that good at Magic, and success.
You have, there's other skill sets a person is made of. You could be the best toy maker in the world, but if you can't read Excel sheets, you just still won't work in toys because you have to fill out forms for factories.
Excel sheets actually run the world.
Right. Like you can be great at sales, but if you can't use PowerPoint, I don't know what to tell you.
Doesn't matter.
So
anyway,
like library of skill set. But yeah, so this tournament series is coming back. I just wish it was more holistic. I wish that they weren't trying to segment these two markets in the way that they were. And I wish that these Command Fest had modern events. I wish I could go and play Modern and Commander and Draft and Uno in the back corner if I wanted to, right? I think that like, and your point that like community members are like, no, this is the time for Commander. I like made a post on Twitter about this, and I did stuff on TikTok, and in both places, TikTok, it was more common. I got more comments being like, oh, why can't just other formats have their own events? Why does Commander have to have spaces for them? And the reason there is that because they announced 14 of them and actively said there won't be any other events other than these 14 Commander ones. If they had said here's 8 Command Fests and here's 8 Modern Fests.
Yeah.
Or 4 Modern Fests and 4 Standard Fests, or 2 Modern Fests, 2 Pioneer Fests, and 2 whatever.
And 1 Legacy Vintage event.
Yeah. Then I think people would have not had that. I would have not have complained. I'd have been like, it's a little weird that, well, I would have complained because the internet. I think like that would be dumb. That would be a mistake. They should all be all at the same thing.
That would not be a good idea, but there wouldn't be this like, are they actively trying to kill other formats question.
Right, exactly.
There's this shroud of malice over the decision of like they're taking away the ways that I like to play Magic.
Right. And I feel for like the Commander Council where they're like, we're trying to manage this format. We're now the most popular thing, and Wizards is doing that to these other formats, and I feel bad for them. I disagree that like that happening is hurting Commander from a perspective that players like to play Magic in one way either can't adjust themselves to the way that they're playing Commander, or that Commander can't handle that type of play style. Like, I don't agree with that is, I guess, my one big thing there. I think that you can figure that out. Commander players, I play both. That's fair. I have a ton of friends that have been able to play both. Can Commander handle grinding to win a Pro Tour seat? No.
Absolutely not.
But I don't like, that doesn't happen until you build a Commander Pro Tour. Like
right. We're nowhere close
to incentives to grind. Like, grinding happens when there's incentives. It's the way it's why that dumb like Neopet Bitcoin knockoff exists. I don't know what it's called.
I have follow-up questions, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. It's scrunchies or something. I don't know. It's basically just Neopets, but the economy is ran on Bitcoin, and apparently like half the population of a small or South Asian country is like economy is based on people just playing this game. It's bad. It's super dystopian. But anyway, like, there were incentives, and so people grinded it. If you don't create the incentives for people to grind, people just won't grind. Like that, the incentives create grindiness. That's how that works. So if Commander does, as long as Commander's not like whoever wins the most Commander games in 1 year gets a trophy.
Oh, Lord, please no.
Then that mentality won't enter Commander. What will enter is, min-maxing stuff, but that happens already. Like, I've never been at a store, and I've played Commander for 15 years, I've never been in a store where there weren't players trying to make their decks better. And every game you play being like, oh, that card was bad. It didn't do anything, or that card cost too much, or, oh, it actually doesn't work with my deck, and cut it and replace it with a better card. Or a new card that then you learn that lesson and that chain goes down the line. Yes, there's like the I think Jason is the one that popularized 30% Magic, right? Where you like on purpose 30% of your cards are worse.
Yeah.
But
that sounds right. I think it's 70% Magic where it's the inverse, but
sure.
Where it's like 70, it's deliberately 70% as good as it could be.
Right. And I think that even in those, I've noticed it's a different incentive, right? You're every game you play, you're gonna be like, oh, this card wasn't fun. I'll replace it with a more fun card. You're still min-maxing for fun, but it's still like,
you're still min-maxing just for a slightly different goal than the Reed Dukes and the Brian Kibblers from 20 years ago would min-max for.
And like the inherent framework of Commander, it does lead to combo, right? That's why CDH is such a combo filled metagame, but like it already removes a lot of the more grind. Like you can't play aggro unless you're trying to do it in a cool way in Commander very well. And you have a lot of life and you're able to kind of bury yourself against things. So I just think those incentives existed in Commander way before. And the fact that, if anything, pro players entering the community has created better language around it, right? Has created a better way to talk towards, this is what I'm looking for versus this is what I'm not. And then also is questioning, is how Commander working right now the best possible version, which we should always be asking. I don't think that I've ever felt like
for pretty much everything
ever,
that question should always be somewhere in the front half of your mind of like, is there a way where we can improve this?
Right. And some of the frustration I do know from the like management side of that is you are entering at point L versus point A on the alphabet scale.
Right. Yeah.
And some of the questions you're
new
asking,
to this, but it's been iterated for, let's say, 25 years.
Right. Some of the questions you're asking, we figured out at point F. And we're now at L. And so
see aforementioned questions about why is Primeval Titan banned.
Exactly. Right. It's like, we've dealt with that. You're new to this. We understand.
Like, there is experience that helped us litigate that decision.
Right. And now some of that is just like it's the amalgamation of Twitter problem, right? Is like everyone, not every pro player has asked questions like that. And not every person answered them with salty takes. If someone was like, hey, why is Primeval Titan banned? Someone might respond with, oh, this is why. And they'd be like, great, that's a good answer. Because one person who had a high follower count went, it's dumb that Primeval Titan is banned. Or why is this? Why in the world is Primeval Titan banned? And then people responded,
and then everybody else responded with, because you're dumb, that's why.
Yeah, is like, oh, now everyone sucks. Instead of like, and like,
now this is not a conversation that is worth engaging with. Right,
exactly. So some pretty prominent members of the CDH community recently kind of posted like, and in their defense, like the only weird thing is they like tagged half of the RC, or I think all of the RC and half the CAG, and then just like other random high profile Magic creators in like what they would want updated about the current philosophical statement about Commander and how it should be run to be more inclusive of competitive play. And then a thread was born from that had like 80 different comments back and forth on it. I think their intent was fine. From the perspective of it, like, I mean, I guess like, can you give like a brief overview of what the original statement was?
Yeah. So one person posted a proposed edited version of the Commander philosophy document, and it says stuff like Commander's a multiplayer format where you talk about your desired experience with your opponents. There's some cards that we recommend that you don't play, but these are just suggestions. All play styles and combos and decks are welcome. That's kind of the gist of it. In a vacuum, it sounds very wholesome. What are your thoughts on that that post, Kess?
My only like the brief overview of what I was saying, my only real complaint is I think the ban list is important.
I agree with that. That was a big piece of pushback from on this original document, is like there should be some strong language about by default these cards are banned, but your playgroup can unban them for your games if you want.
Yeah. I don't know if we've had this conversation. I think the commander ban list should be like twice the size. I don't know if
We
it
have
needs
had
to
this
happen.
conversation for
Yeah,
sure.
okay. I don't know if it happens to happen tomorrow, right? Like I don't think let's ban 30 cards now. I think that at the rate of cards being printed into Magic and as a percentage of how many cards are on the ban list versus how many cards exist up to this point, we should be banning somewhere between 3 and 5 cards a year.
I think the current number is like 2-ish, 2.5 over the last few years. So
and I think the 3 to 5 includes unbanning 1 to 2 in that period as well. So adjusting in both ways, right?
Yeah, I agree with both of those points. I think that I also think that Wizards should be a lot more aggressive about banning, but I agree that the rules committee should be a little bit more aggressive than they are now about banning cards, and I think they're pretty good about unbanning cards. There's usually 1 to 2 cards per year that come off the ban list.
I agree with that. I think
the
their
unbanning
history has been pretty spot on. There's a few weird ones, but
yeah.
I don't think Worldfire should have been unbanned, and I do think Door to Nothingness or whatever that's been the
Coalition Victory?
Coalition Victory could be unbanned, and neither of them are I think they have the exact same purpose of boring, and neither of them would see very much play regardless. But I think that Worldfire is a much more emblematic these type of cards suck card, and Coalition Victory, there's just a lot of fun cards that are like that. I don't think it's representing anything that's specifically problematic.
But in general, I agree that the ban list can be a little bit longer. And going back to this document that we want to discuss, I think that the ban list language should be a little bit stronger so that there's a baseline expectation rather than just it's vintage, but 100 cards, and that's it.
I've had fun. I think we did it on this podcast where we talked about the Power 9 of Modern, and we had a brief conversation on which cards you would unban, and I think you could unban Black Lotus and 1 Mox, but not all 5, and Ancestral Recall.
Unban all 5 Mox, and
no. I think actually the most dangerous thing to unban on the command on the ban of the Power 9 is all 5 Moxen. I think all 5 is worse than any other card that you can unban.
I agree. I think green is the first one that should be unbanned.
I think you can ban white. I think white would be better actually than green. I think green is the weakest for sure, but I think
that's kind of what I'm saying. I think green would be the least impactful.
I don't think their power level is the problem individually, right? I think white getting a cool 0 mana. We don't have to get into this because we did a whole episode on it, but basically my thesis is if you unban all 5, you incentivize every deck to be a 5-color deck or a 4-color deck, and the less colors you play, your deck is significantly worse in power level. Also, these cards are just bonkers expensive and don't need to be unbanned. But yes, I think that's my issue with kind of that statement. Everything else, though, being holistic, my more issue is people started responding to this post, and there was this mentality of we need to protect the casual Magic player from these evil competitive players. And that's the thing I take umbrage with, and that's an exaggeration of kind of what the comments were for sure.
That's kind of blown a little bit out of proportion.
Okay, so the person who said this, I don't want to say any names.
It depends on who's saying
has done this type of statement in multiple threads now, and this is not the original creator. And when they have done it, it is always the sentiment of casual play. It comes from a perspective that sounds like casual players are the minority or a minority group of playing Magic, which has been true in the past, but is ostensibly not true now. And by a wide margin.
It's hard to say that Commander is the most popular format, but casual players are the minority.
Right.
Both of those things cannot be true.
And the attitude is we don't want to give a handout to players who want to play Commander competitively because historically competitive players have been given deference, and the point of Commander is to not give them deference. And that attitude to me sucks and is like a thing I wish wasn't a thing said. Because I think like there's an argument for like, we want to make sure this is focused on the major group of people playing this format. That's fine. We want to make sure that the language is leading it towards this great. That's fine. We don't think we want competitive players to go play other formats because we think that the way that they would play Commander is not how we would want to play Commander. When Wizards of the Coast a week ago announced 15 events that were in paper person Magic events, the first one's happening since the pandemic ended, and all of them are Commander events that are not allowed to have any other format played above an 8 pod, is a wild position to take. To me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult. Like I said, it's difficult to say that like casual players need protecting. I will say I think it's still important that Commander is the only it's the only popular format that I know of that doesn't just reward winning. Like all the tournament Magic formats, you are rewarded for winning, and if you do not win, then try harder.
Sure.
And I think that like kind of attitude.
There's only 3 real formats then. There's Commander, there's Limited, there I guess 4 if you want to count Sealed and Draft separately.
Yeah, I mean it depends on how granular you want to be, but like whether you say Constructed Tournament, Limited Tournament, Commander are the 3 formats, or if you want to say Modern, Standard, Pioneer, Limited, Sealed,
but all of that is just like, based on card availability and legality. Like I don't like
but
that.
The point is,
yeah.
The point is, Commander
is I sit at I sit with a deck that I made and I play in a tournament versus I sit at a table with 3 other friends and we play a format, or I sit at a pod and draft the deck. Like that to me is because or we can segment it, right? We can talk about Brawl and Tiny Leaders and Oathbreaker and Artisan and whatever Captain.
No, veto. We don't have time to get into that.
I just have to hit every hot button issue this episode. I
do think it's important. Unironically, I do think it's important that Commander, let's say Commander variants are one of the other formats you are rewarded for winning. Obviously, there are restrictions to each format, but if you win games, you are successful. In Commander, you can be successful regardless of winning or losing because the format incentivizes other endpoints or goals.
Well, so I guess 2 things to that. One is I don't think it's always true that winning is the only incentive within 60 card or 75 card Magic. And by that, I mean, I would argue that the Pro Tour experience was not only the actual tournament, but was the preparation for that tournament. And that experience, losing and winning, isn't the goal. It's finding out what gives you the best chance of winning, which is eventually the goal for that event. But if I'm playing a game, I don't care if I lose or win. I care making sure I'm making the best decisions I can and I'm learning from that. Right. So I guess like, because if most people sit to a Commander table, and I'm willing to say most, I would say like 90% are sitting at a Commander table with the incentive of trying to win that Commander pod.
Sure. Yeah. I'm not saying that people don't want to win. I'm saying that in Commander, more than in any other format, fun and winning are separate from each other.
Does the fact, like the segmentation that it's the only, and by only format, we've already talked about that. That's kind of not true because of all the random
only
offshoots
format
of it.
Asterisk. Someone put Marshall put an asterisk.
Yeah, Tiny Leaders. Only
Tiny Leaders incentivizes time travel. Send tweet.
I have a whole time travel tweet or a TikTok going on right now too. Don't about why time travel is not possible. But really, let me finish the sentence. I don't think it matters that it's the only format that does it when it is over 60% of Magic players who are playing it. Basically, it's just like it doesn't matter that there's only one format if it's everything, right? Like
right.
if and their point is they don't want it to be everything. They want other formats to exist so they don't have to bear the weight of this. The problem,
which is correct,
except that they've just invented the best format of Magic accidentally.
Yeah.
In some ways. I mean, I think modern is one of the best. Like I realize this is a modern podcast and I do think
modern sucks. You heard it here first, folks.
That is not true. Please be mean to Carson in the comments.
It's true. I can take it. No.
But the is definitely the most popular. It is easily one of the easiest to entree for a new player to join the format. You don't have to spend $1,000 to $15,000, $1,500 to get into Commander. You can spend now $60, previously $40 out of the box.
$50-ish dollars.
Hitting every hot button issue. By the way, time travel issue is that if you time travel, you are time traveling to the past at a specific point in space that you're in now, meaning that the Earth is somewhere else, and that's why you can't do it because space moves and time travel doesn't.
That's true.
This is how ADD works. You remember the random joke from earlier. But yeah, I like, yeah. So the sub format conversation, like, I think that like the argument that this is the only format for casual people when this is more than half of Magic is weightless to me. It like doesn't like making sure it doesn't leave that group is fine, right? Like the reason it is as successful it is because it's great for new players. It's great for old players. It's great for people that just want to have a good time. It is the only popular multiplayer format. And if people want to play in that format, they kind of at this point have to play Commander. And the people behind Commander aren't out there really pushing sub formats, right? It's not like, in fact, every conversation I've ever had with everyone behind it, and I agree with this statement, is that CDH spinning off with its own ban list is a bad idea.
I agree with that.
Like it wouldn't be a successful option, but the argument they're making here is that they should do that.
And it wouldn't solve any of the problems that they set out to solve.
Correct.
Except maybe that people who like empathize with CEDH would be managing their corner of the format.
The benefit to having CEDH have its own thing is maybe fixing that tournament issue where you can now ban Kark. I guess. Yeah. Right. Like the ban list is better for tournament play from an organization perspective.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that there is a reason to do that in a way that is beneficial. But if you're going to say this is the like, I guess that's my big response, right? Is that this is the only 4-player format. This is 100% a 4-player format Magic. Nothing else. Like sub small formats of Invention exist.
I think that is the biggest problem with Commander is that there really isn't any competition for casual or multiplayer formats. Like you can play, you can play tabletop modern, but that's not
the
point.
Your deck, like the decks that you're playing, yeah, like it would just be Commander. You'd get through it and be like, I guess I can play. Like, I delved really deep into Oathbreaker. There were a lot of cool things with Oathbreaker. One of them was by having a smaller deck size, you're able to have more direct strategies. By having 20 life, you're able to be more aggressive with your strategies. By having
and not being multiplayer.
And what is multiplayer?
Oh, it is?
Oathbreaker is multiplayer. Yeah. It's literally Commander, but you have a 60 card deck. Your life total is 25. You have a Planeswalker as a commander versus a creature, and you get a spell that goes with it that you can only cast if your Planeswalker is in play. Otherwise, it's the same as Commander. It's a 4-player, multiplayer,
gotcha.
Blah, blah, blah. I don't think there's not commander damage because you have Planeswalkers.
Because they're Planeswalkers, yeah.
Yeah. Not to say a Planeswalker can't attack someone. I'm a big Sarkon, the Masterless fan, but yeah, I like that. This is basically, my main kind of point is like I think Commander can be all these things. I don't know. Like, I think Modern can too, right? I think Modern can be casual. I'm a big proponent of, I'm going to build the Vivian Planebound Accomplice deck. I literally got a bunch of Planebound Accomplice, the new Vivian
birthing pod.
This deck may win FNMs. It's not winning a Grand Prix anytime soon. Maybe it is. I mean, like, it might be good enough, but like, yeah, definitely the idea is like, this is probably not good enough. And that's fine, because I'm not trying to win a Grand Prix. I'm not trying to go to the Pro Tour. I have a new child. I can't do that. And
I'm not trying to go anywhere.
Yeah, I was sad today because I missed bath time because I had to run to the office. And it's been 2 days in a row that's happened, and I'm actively depressed. I'm not trying to travel somewhere. And so if anything, this podcast has always been a proponent of like, casual Modern is great. Having fun playing Magic is the important part of Magic. And there are other podcasts you can go listen to if you want the top tips on the best performing deck in Modern every week so that you can win a tournament and get better at it. Most of them don't last very long, I think partially because that just is a grind to talk about that, where there's a lot of other cool stuff you can do in this format, and you can do that, right? We do have episodes about that pretty regularly. So you have all these options for it. I think you just I think you want, if Commander is going to be, not if, because it is. Commander is the largest, most played format in Magic. It is the most popular way you can play this game. It is the only multiplayer format. It is one of the 3 main formats of Magic, which is my next part of the thesis. And it is like a disagreement, right? If you're just going to say Commander is the only casual facing one, then I get to say that Legacy, Modern, Standard, and Pioneer are all the same format in that same framework. And does Commander need those segmentations? I do think so, but I don't think it needs to be by card availability lines, right? I think there's different ways to do that. I think that's one of the greatness of CDH, and why I wish, and not I wish, because I think this is happening, but they deserve to be heralded as a good job for creating a segmentation that people can follow the framework and know what they're doing ahead of time. And we need that for all of the other corners. And I think that's the solution, more than coming up with separate formats, right? I think honestly, I think Oathbreaker's biggest mistake is changing its ban list from the Commander ban list. They unbanned Primeval Titan and the green-blue guy.
Prophet of Krufix.
That, they unbanned those 2 cards, which means that my deck can no longer be backwards compatible. I was able to live in this world where I had 4 decks that were all Oathbreaker decks that were very easily turned into Commander decks. And just depending on who I was playing with, I just had the Oathbreaker cards upside down, or the cards that weren't in the Oathbreaker deck upside down, and would just take them out in those games. By unbanning cards, those are no longer backwards compatible, which for me kills the format as an easy access point. And I think Commander can do that. I think there's ways to play in this space. And that, I guess, is the other thing that I've ruminated over recently, is there's this attitude in Magic, and this happens everywhere, right? This happened with Frontier, where you belittle upstart formats. Do you know, right? Kind of we did it already. We did in this podcast. We laughed at tiny leaders existing. And I think those formats are magical. I love that tiny leaders happened. I love that tiny leaders caused Leovold to be created and then eventually banned. And I'm glad that I'm not glad no one plays tiny leaders, but it's fine that format existed for 6 months. It's cool.
Oh, yeah. To be fair, I was laughing at you referencing a mostly dead format.
Yes, yeah. Fair.
That is the butt of the joke. Is that tiny leaders functionally does not exist anymore.
Right. But I think that's the beauty of Magic. There will always be these subformats, and people take to them no, this format is a joke because it's not ever going to try and be Commander. It's never going to be Standard. And I'm always like, just try it. Most formats are cheap to enter, especially the singleton ones. It's you don't need that many cards to have one of each card. And you can put together something that makes sense off of your collection. I love Oathbreaker. I love Artisan. I loved Frontier. I thought that was a really cool micro format. I loved the silver border era of Commander when Unglued came out, right? I think there's cool ways to play in these spaces, and we would be better off championing these segmented formats than...
Oh yeah, big agree.
Than kind of the classic where they become the like haha MTG finance joke that can happen out there. And I think that's the next, like, the last piece of this episode for me is that, like, the solution to this problem is not saying, hey, Commander shouldn't be the home of pro players. Wizards should be supporting pro play more, right? Like, all these command fests should be Magic Fests. They should have just brought Magic Fests back, have them not be Grand Prix centered, and have them just be really cool Magic conventions around the world. There should be,
like, what we thought they were going to be right before COVID, and then the pandemic happened, and now we don't. Now we have command fests again, and nothing else.
And, like, I think that, like, the DreamHack stuff is really cool. I think that the fact that we're getting a PTQ system back and stores are going to be able to start running regional PTQ qualifiers is all amazing. I just wish we, like, also recognize that, like, Commander is a different game than that. And it's not that players that, like, I don't think that coming back is going to lessen the amount of players that want to play Commander. Because you get it's never for me. I've played Modern and Commander forever. I've played them both for the same amount of time, equal amounts. I've had decks for both. I love both formats greatly. They scratch totally different itches in the back of my brain. And CDH doesn't scratch the Modern itch either. It's not like me playing Commander at the most competitive level is like, oh, yes, now I don't feel like I want to go run a tournament of Modern. They're different. It's a different game. And I think that, like, I don't know. And I think they're both I think they're in great positions. I think this new announcement is great. There's things that I would tweak, and Command Fests being a big part of it. The wild card cost on Arena is silly. And Wizards employees.
Hot take. Wild cards are fairly costed. Add me in the comments.
Is that a real hot take?
No, it's not.
All right, I think that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much, Carson, for joining. This is a little bit of a mess of a Twitter discourse experience, but it was great having you. Well, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at CMasse13, or you can find me helping manage some of your favorite content creator Discord spaces.
From the RC to
the Rules Committee, Olivia Gobert-Hicks. I don't think I'm in the MMcast Discord. Recently, Tulane Community College Discord. If you're looking for a cool place to, like, play some webcam Magic, Prof recently opened up his Discord looking for game stuff.
It's really great in there. It's a great place. I would bet we could get Prof to open up Modern tables as well. In fact,
yeah, it's actively open for anybody who wants to play any kind of Magic is welcome to play whatever format you want. If you want to play Modern, if you want to play Pioneer, if you can find someone else who wants to play Tiny Leaders with
There's a fringe format section, so that exists.
Perfect place for Modern.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, Channel Fireball, Ultra Pro, Ultra Sleeves, and all of our sponsors, and Beetle and Grim for the awesome Kamigawa backpack, and all of the swag inside of it. And make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, hit that subscribe and like button, and we will talk to you next week.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.